Teamwork isn't just nice to have in business, it's the undisputed competitive advantage. When your team members work as a unified force, your whole operation benefits through higher productivity, thriving creativity, and unstoppable momentum. Welcome to the Impactful Teamwork Podcast, where we share with you strategies and tactics to help you develop game-changing teams so that you and your business can make a real difference in the world.
Welcome back to this week's edition of Impactful Teamwork. My name's Julia Felton. I'm going to be your host and guide for the next 20 minutes while we delve into another topic that is very relevant to us all right now and impacts us all as leaders and team members. And today I want to explore a concept that actually was shared with me last year, I believe. But I heard about it in passing and didn't really think much about it, but it's really come back onto my radar a lot in the last couple of weeks. And I think it's really important that this is something that we address. And this is the fact that, as many of you will know, I have been talking about us living in a VUCA world, this volatile, uncertain, chaotic, ambiguous world. And the term VUCA has been around for quite a while. It's a term that came out of the military, and it has been a phraseology that we've been using to describe the kind of environment that we're operating in right now. However, things move on, and there's now a new kid in town, and that kid is called BANI. And BANI is the name for a new framework that is being used to really describe the current situation in which we are operating. And I think the term VUCA, it worked well in a world where volatility still had some rhythm and where potentially we could wait out the uncertainty. The VUCA terminology worked well where complexity had some patterns. And ambiguity often meant a choice between one thing or another. And it created a framework for us in an unstable world that was, ironically, still manageable. But today, we're not really just living in that VUCA world. We're actually living in a world that has transformed and is something quite different. So the acronym BANI, it stands for Brittle, Anxious, Nonlinear, and Incomprehensible. And actually the term was first coined by a futurist, Jamais Cascio, in 2018. And what I thought today would be helpful was to really unpack and explore BANI as a lens for understanding this fractured, unpredictable state that we find the modern world in today. So let's just unpack what each of the elements of BANI stand for. So B stands for brittle. And if we think about something that's brittle, it appears to be initially quite strong. It can be quite a sturdy structure, but it doesn't take a lot to make things crack. And we think about things like old bones that are very brittle. They were something that was quite sturdy, but you take something out of them, you leach the energy and the water out of them, and they crack quite easily. And I think that's true of a lot of the systems and structures that exist today. Whilst in the past, these were quite robust, nowadays, they are shockingly fragile. And what we're seeing is like one tiny crack and the whole system is beginning to implode. So let's just think about a few examples of where this has happened. There was a large earthquake in Japan, and that shut down production of one small, inexpensive chip But the ripple impact of that was it halted car production in Detroit in the US. There was also a CrowdStrike software update that went wrong, and the result of that was millions of Windows computers locked up. And as a result of that, flights were grounded around the world. We also saw this in March 2021 when the Ever Given, which was the cargo ship that run aground in the Suez Canal. What was the impact of that? It was incredible. I remember doing some work in the catering industry at the time, and a lot of the plastics from China couldn't get to us quickly because the Suez Canal was closed. All the trade ships were having to be diverted round the southern tip of Africa. So that had a spin-on effect in terms of availability of supplies and cost of supplies. More recently, the war in Ukraine, we've seen the impact that's had on energy prices across the world. So this is how a small change that impacts one area has this ripple effect throughout the world. So what does that mean? That means that this brittleness demands resilience. And it also means as leaders, we really can't optimize for efficiency anymore. And as leaders, we have to be prepared for failure and disruption and this domino impact, this ripple impact of small cracks. So that kind of means that redundancy no longer is waste. We actually have to plan it into our systems in order to survive. So that's the B for brittle. The A stands for anxious. And it's true that in our VUCA world, things were very uncertain and confused. Grade of anxiety that persists continually, which is on a very different level to the uncertainty that we experienced in the VUCA era. And there's anxiety for people on so many different levels, on economic levels, on political levels, in the levels of trust between employers and employees, team members worried whether their roles are going to be made redundant with the advent of AI, a lot of concern about how long businesses will survive. So this underlevel of anxiety is causing some stress for all of us, and we will delve into that a little bit more shortly. But what is the challenge of being in this state of anxiety? It is that it creates paralysis. And that makes decision-making harder and risks even scarier. So what can we do as a leader? We can't change this level of anxiety per se, but we can offer empathy and optimism. And that's what people need from us right now. They need us to be honest, empathetic, and very clear in our direction, and vulnerable when we don't know what course to follow. The N is for nonlinear. So in a VUCA world, situations may have been complex, but they can often be mastered over time with intelligence and resources. And in the past, we've always seen this relationship between inputs and outputs. But in a BANI world, this causality breaks. And this is where we're seeing this ripple effect happen, where one event is triggering another event that is completely unforeseen. So an example of this actually happened just quite recently with DeepSeek, which is the new AI tool that you might say competitor to ChatGPT that was launched by the Chinese. And when that was launched, it erased trillions of dollars from the stock market. So the launch of this one single product just had a massive impact on the whole AI industry. So what does that mean? It means that careful linear thinking is now a liability we've got to, as leaders, accept that answers will not only come from action, but also rapid interaction and agility. And this is why, with a lot of the clients that I've been sharing some of my reinvention methodologies with, we're talking a lot more about using something called the stellar canvas for looking at the future, because the future is nonlinear. And where we thought we were going to get to is probably not where we're going to get to. So our destination has to become not a specific point in time, but more a spectrum of where we want to go to. And the I is for incomprehensible. So what does that mean? It means that actually being smarter really doesn't matter in an incomprehensible world. I think we can probably all agree that we're drowning in data, and technology is accelerating faster than we can even grasp it. And we have these mind-blowing AI breakthroughs happening on a weekly basis. So what can we do when we truly can't comprehend the world around us? I think this is the unsettling truth. Leaders need to accept that they are never going to comprehend everything, but they need to take action anyway. And it's our job now as leaders to take calculated risks, move quickly, lean on our intuition, even when it's impossible to see the full picture. Because BANI is the mirror that's reflecting this new reality that we're in, with these brittle systems and anxious people, nonlinear outcomes, and incomprehensible complexity. And so what that's demanding is that leaders build these resilient organizations with lower levels of anxiety, where we embrace things working in a non-linear fashion, and we manage to act decisively amid the incomprehensibility. And I said I just wanted to talk a little bit more about anxiety, because I think that this is very important. Because this anxiety doesn't just cause individuals and businesses to slow down. We can also see it effectively, to use a metaphor, nailing our team members' feet to the ground. Because what happens when people are anxious, they typically don't fight or flee, but what they do is freeze. And when our team members freeze, nothing gets done. A team member who is nervous isn't innovative and creative and coming up with solutions. More likely, when they're frozen, they're stuck in their traditional ways. They're maybe even hiding in the corner, just not contributing or making a difference to the organization at a time when we need them to contribute more than ever. So what can we do as a leader when everyone is overwhelmed and overstimulated and too anxious to think straight? The first thing that we can do is we can over-communicate and not spin. Because the one thing that anxiety loves is silence. And if we go mute, our people fill the gaps with the worst case scenario. And I think I've shared the story with you previously of when I was leading my team through the demise of Arthur Andersen after the Enron incident. And sometimes it felt like we wasn't much to say, so I didn't communicate very effectively with my team. And what they did then was go and join the dots incorrectly about what was potentially happening with our business unit. So this is the challenge when we don't communicate with people. They join the dots and often come up with the wrong answer. So it's really important that we're really honest and clear and share what we know, and very importantly, what we don't know. Be vulnerable, tell people, I'm really sorry, I don't know what the impact of this takeover is going to be. I really don't know if we're going to have jobs or not. People appreciate, and that's what I learned, people really appreciate that transparency from you and that honesty. The other thing that we can do when team members are feeling really anxious and overwhelmed is really empower them more and give the team the wheel. Because anxiety increases even more when people feel powerless. And having a sense of control is one of our basic human needs that we enjoy. So, as leaders, what does that mean we can do? It means that it's really important to empower our team members to handle some of the decisions. And some of these might just be minor problem solving or scheduling issues, but never underestimate the effectiveness of giving the power to your team members. So an example here is Patagonia, and they let their retail teams decide on their stores' local community initiatives and environmental projects. Or Trader Joe's, which is a big health food chain in the US, lets the store crews choose which local products to stock and how to arrange their stores. And even Pixar, when it faced some huge production delays on Toy Story 2, they actually let the animators reorganize their work schedules and processes. And in fact, what happened was the team delivered a masterpiece. Less stress, more engagement. So what we see is people relax when they feel that they've got this semblance of control because they are grabbing the wheel and having some impact and influence on decision making. The third thing we can do as leaders is make sure it's psychologically safe to speak up. Because what happens is when people get anxious and fear starts gripping a room, gripping a team, then typically what we see is silence. And this is why it's really important to open up dialogue between people and make sure that people know that it's okay to experiment. It's okay for things to not quite work out. And we know from a piece of research that Google did that they found that psychological safety was the number one factor in creating top performing teams. Because, not surprisingly, it turns out human beings work better when they're not terrified. When they're not in that freeze position, people can work more effectively. And the fourth thing that we can do to help mitigate this level of anxiety that many of our team members are finding themselves in is to be real and not sugarcoat anything. Acknowledge the problems going on and be very transparent about what needs to happen. Because the antidote to panic is clarity. And as leaders, that's what we always need to be doing. We need to be trying to find a way to give our team members clarity. So what we're beginning to see in our leaders in this new BANI world. And I'd just like to share 5 core competencies that I think that leaders really need today. And this is that they need to be visionary. They've got to be able to share the future. Leaders of today, we call them unbridled leaders, need to be strategic storytellers. They need to help start crafting a narrative that turns the uncertainty into clarity and anxiety into hope. And these unbridled leaders don't just see the future, they help other people enroll in their vision of the future and see it too. The second of the core competencies is that leaders today must be more agile and be able to adapt to the future. Because the future isn't going to go in a straight line. Leaders need to be able to expect change and pivot when needed. And encourage their teams to experiment and fail and iterate. Leaders today can't cling to rigid plans. However, they do need to stay committed to the ultimate goal, but recognize that the way that they achieve that goal may well change along the way. Thirdly, leaders need to be very innovative and shape the future. And in fact, now more than ever, we don't want to wait for the future to unfold. We actually need to create it. We need to start challenging assumptions and asking better questions and fostering environments where bold and courageous ideas can emerge. Because creativity isn't optional, it's a requirement. And nothing makes this more poignant than when we recognize the speed of reinvention that is going on in the world right now. Because if businesses wait until their product starts declining, they have missed their opportunity to reinvent. We need to start reinventing businesses before they get to the top of the business cycle and move them up to a new S curve. So leaders really need to be brave in terms of looking into the future and the trends that are happening and responding before the changes happen. Great leaders understand the power of relationships and the power of shared leadership. They recognize they don't need to have all of the answers. And they also understand and recognize the power of seeking input from other people, either within or without of the organization. Because the best ideas come from unexpected places. And this is the power of having diversity of thought within your leadership team, within your business. So great leaders recognize that in order for this to happen, they need to build trust, connection, and have a shared vision for where the progress is going. And lastly, our unbridled leaders for the future need to be resilient, and they need to persevere in the face of adversity. Because setbacks aren't the end, they are merely just data points. And unbridled leaders use failure as fuel. They learn from the setbacks and lead their team forward with even more determination. They don't just endure tough times, they grow stronger because of them. So in conclusion, I think what we can see is that in this BANI world, traditional leadership approaches are falling short. Because when systems are brittle, we need leaders who build resilience. When anxiety pervades, we need leaders who inspire hope. When change is nonlinear, we need leaders who adapt swiftly. And when reality seems incomprehensible, we need leaders who can make sense of chaos. So becoming an unbridled leader isn't an optional for tomorrow's leaders. It's an imperative. It's an imperative as organizations navigate this increasingly complex world in which we live in and in which they need to have this ability to adapt quickly. And this is why I'm so passionate about sharing with you, and I've shared this on other podcasts, this model of leading through uncertainty that comes from the horses. Because the horses have been on the planet for many years, and they have learned the skills to lead through this adversity and navigate this BANI world, this brittle, anxious, nonlinear, incomprehensible world. So if you would like your team to learn the skills to lead in a BANI world, then please do reach out to me for a complimentary conversation. And let me share with you how I can really help you transform your team and help you build the leadership capability that you need right now if you and your business are to survive in this new BANI world. So I hope you found today's podcast interesting. It was so fun doing the research for this, and it really opened my eyes to how the landscape of business is changing so quickly and how we as leaders need to stay tuned into that in order to stay ahead of the game. So my invitation to you this week is to really look at what the leadership capability is within your organization on what are you going to be doing differently this week, this month, and this year to help your leaders develop the skills to lead in a BANI world. Okay, until next week, hope you have a great time. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Impactful Teamwork Podcast. Please stay tuned for future episodes and do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating on your favourite platform. Recommendations are essential for attracting new listeners. Please follow us on social media at Julia Felton and at Business Horsepower. And if there are any topics you'd like us to cover on future episodes, please do let me know. Remember, you and your team are always making an impact. What impact will you make today?